So a lot of people are talking about boundaries this past week with me, and boundaries are tough. They're very important. That's your protection. If you were shamed and humiliated when you tried to set boundaries when you were younger, you're gonna have that feeling every time you try to set boundaries. For a lot of people, setting boundaries was a loss of connection, loss of affection, loss of love. And when you're young and that happens, that imprint stays with you pretty dramatically. Can't really speak. So if it comes up where you need to set a boundary for yourself and you're struggling with it, those infant needs, those childhood needs, they're gonna come up, and there's a fear on a level that goes below thought, where your body just reacts with fear. And we tend to allow people to walk over our boundaries instead of having the confrontation, the discussion of setting that boundary. Because instinctively we're gonna feel like it's gonna be a loss for us. Because we weren't allowed to have boundaries back then, we feel that we can't have them now. You could read all you want about it, you could write about it, you can listen to self-help tapes, you can watch videos. They're only going to get you so far. If you don't get out in the world and practice setting boundaries, you're never going to learn how to set boundaries. It's like watching a Jane Fonda workout videotape and telling yourself that you're exercising. Did I just date myself with the Jane Fonda thing? I think so. It's about exposure. We have these feelings inside when we get into situations that make us feel uncomfortable, scared, frightened, anxious, angry, frustrated. If we avoid them, we're never going to learn how to deal with them. So you could sit alone and try to figure out a way to feel right, which is never going to work. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be reading, you shouldn't be writing, you shouldn't be going to therapy. Those are all important things. But if you do not get out and practice setting them in the real world, you're never gonna get through them. You're never gonna grow past it, and you're just gonna live in fear of those feelings. And those are the feelings that you gotta take a look at. You gotta identify and see where they lead and why they're there. I struggle with boundaries, I do. There's almost like a unwritten contract that I have with people. They don't realize that they're entering into it, and I never really did either. It was just, I will put on my false self and be who I think you want me to be, so everything goes smooth, so that I'll never have to set a boundary, because that is way too uncomfortable for me. There is so much loss attached to setting boundaries for me. There's shame and humiliation that goes along with it. Not knowing the patterns and repeating them over and over just gets you nowhere. You have to identify it and plow through it. It is very difficult. If you are in a relationship, if you're in a friendship, if it's your boss, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, and you're afraid to speak up for yourself and set the boundaries you need and put that layer of protection between that you and that person, it could be that you just don't want to deal with those feelings, and those are the feelings you need to deal with, and they are not happening now. They're old feelings that you've carried throughout your life that you haven't detached from. And you get that queasy feeling in the stomach, your body starts to tremble, you get the shakes, you go up in your head, your body gets all hot, your face gets all flushed. It's very entertaining, it's a lot of fun. But it's practice. It's like anything else. You can't sit there and watch that exercise video and think you're gonna get in shape. You actually have to get up and do the work. We cannot think our way into it. We have to act our way out of it. So if you're struggling with boundaries, just take a look at it. Take a look at the feelings and try to map them back, and then disconnect from whatever that scene is in your past that keeps you from setting them. They're important. You're allowed to have your protection. You're allowed to have your boundaries. You're allowed to have your limits. You need to know where you end and somebody else begins. You cannot have that overlap where you don't know who you are and you're taking on somebody else's identity. You just can't do it because you'll never be whole. You will constantly be reacting to somebody else's reaction. When you don't have boundaries, you take on other people's needs and wants to make you feel less anxious, less uncomfortable, and less fearful. And that's the deciding factor right there. Do I want to set this boundary and go through these difficult feelings, or do I want to take a step back, let this person walk all over me just to keep the peace? To have a good, healthy, lasting relationship with yourself and somebody else, you need to have those hard conversations with yourself first so that you can have them with somebody else. And they're difficult. It is so difficult to uncover something about yourself that you don't like. I just had that happen like 3 days ago, and I feel like there's 12 people I want to call and apologize to because I was an ass and I didn't know it. So not knowing why you do things is just going to cause havoc in your life. Pay attention to those feelings. Do not dismiss them. Do not push them away. And do not take that path of least resistance where you just open yourself up and let somebody come in and take over because you can't set a boundary. Boundaries are very difficult and very important. And most of it is going to come back from a time when you were an infant, a toddler, an adolescent. So go back and see what happened and fix it. Because as your life is now, and if you don't start doing it now, when are you going to do it? Feel worth it. You have worth and value, and you have to give that worth and value to yourself before you could share it with somebody else. Because if you don't have that worth and that value, you are just going to turn over and be a doormat and a people pleaser, and you're not going to be understanding why people treat you this way. And it's their fault, and they did this to me. We allow it, and that has to stop. Nobody teaches us how to do these things. There's not an emotional intelligence class in any school that I know of. Nobody wants to be looking at this stuff. Nobody teaches us at an early age. We get to a certain point where we're just fed up and tired of the same thing over and over. But there's no course. There's no roadmap. We're all individuals. We have different paths, different maps that got us here. And we have to go back and see where it started and where it came from. Take the time for yourself to sit with those painful feelings, identify them, and figure out where they came from and how to change them. You have to get out and do it. You have to expose yourself to emotions and feelings that you don't want to feel. And that's the only way to start healing this. So take the time for yourself. You're worth it, and you need to know that. Take care. Bye-bye.